right, here we go. We're live. Welcome back. This has been, holy cow, my camera's way too low. Well, this has been like a month since I've actually done one of these videos. Reason why, and if you notice, background's different because we were moving. Super excited to be moved in and super excited to be making content again for you guys. Going to be doing a live reaction video to Alex Hormorzi's sales method that he discovered about not answering questions to close deals faster. I actually think I've had this method used on me before in the past. So excited to see what this video is, and we're just going to jump right into it.
Salespeople across our portfolio that does over $250 million a year. In this video, I'm going to teach you one sales skill that separates the best from the rest. And it's so powerful, I've never taught it before. And so I'm going to cover the 3A framework of reframing, which is the skill I'm going to teach you, and the 5 rules for using it ethically. So what's reframing? Reframing is the 1 to 3 sentences that you say after a prospect says anything but yes, that increases the likelihood that whatever your next thing you say gets them to buy. So
yeah. A lot of people will also call this like objection handling. So again, difference between like objections and smoke screens. Smoke screens, for example, I don't have time right now. It's just a smoke screen. They're trying to like get you off their doorstep, right? If you're doing door-to-door sales, for example, or off the phone, if you're doing Zoom calls, whatever it may be, versus, you know, I can't afford this also could be a smoke screen, but like legit financial event, you know, they have objection where they have like all their credit cards maxed out and $0 in the bank, right? Actual objection to why they can't buy.
Here's how a reframe might sound. Someone might say, hey, how many certifications do your trainers have? Now, this is a trap question because it's basically a blind question where whatever you say in response, the prospect gets to be the judge of whether or not they accept that, and then they choose to buy or not. And you don't know what the right answer is. And so rather than answer the question, you ask a question about the question. And so you'd say something like, well, which certifications are you looking for specifically? The next version of this might be someone says, how many questions I'm going to be able to ask via email in support? Now, whatever number you give, they might say, oh, that's not enough, or that's too many, or whatever it is, and then they say, no, for that reason, I don't want to buy. So instead, you might say, well, why do you want to ask additional questions? How many questions do you want to ask? Is there a purpose that you're trying to solve with this? Like, what are you most afraid of? See, that was like 2 or 3 questions in a row that can reframe without answering the question they gave me. And one of the biggest lessons that I teach in sales is the person asking the questions is...
So biggest trick right here is they're literally just looking for a reason, again, to get off the phone. They're waiting for you to mess up. So the best way you can do that is and what he's really doing is turning it back on them. This is something we actually work with our sales reps here at Laney Media to actually say, and I gotta rephrase how I'm saying this. It's actually to dive deeper into what the actual objection is. Because a lot of these things, like, can I ask questions over email? This example, I would call that literally just a smokescreen because it's not something that actually matters that much. And most of the time is not what the actual concern is from the client. It's actually, you know, am I going to get results from this program, or what guarantee can you make from me, or whatever it is. It's that hesitation coming out in that format. So although they are objecting to making the deal close right now, I would call it more of a smokescreen because they want the result of the call, but you haven't built that bridge completely to where they can really trust you and move forward with the purchase.
The one who's in control. And so you've ever seen the Hollywood movies where they're like, I'm the one asking the questions here. It's because the person who asks the questions is the one who's in control of the conversation. As soon as they start asking the questions, you're on defense, which is not where you want to be. And the reframing process I'm about to show you has sold things as low as $100 all the way up to $1 million plus service packages. And it's sold them in person, on the phone, via Zoom, from stage, wherever which way you can imagine. This works. So in a second, I'm going to give you the 3 A's framework and 5 rules for using it because this is unbelievably powerful, and used the right way, it helps lots of people make good decisions. Used the wrong way, you become a very bad person and give a bad reputation for sales. So the reason I started thinking about this was I was writing and reviewing our closing manual for our closers. And I had this little piece right before all the closes that says, hey, by the way, make sure that you reframe the question before you enter into the close. But the thing is I realized as I was walking through the sales floor the other day, I heard someone just immediately fire back an obstacle overcome, and it seemed very combative. And I was like, they're not getting the reframe part. And I realized that little reframe, little bubble, was one of, if not the most important part of handling sales. And so if you think about what the most productive salespeople do, the people who close the highest percentage of sales, what do? They ask for the sale more times than anyone else. Now here's the problem with that, is that if you ask more times than anyone else the wrong way, you'll get prospects to hate you. And if prospects hate you, they won't buy from you. And so the idea is we want to be able to ask for the sale as many times as possible, which means the way that we ask for the sale or how we frame our ask should not decrease rapport with the customer. And so the idea is we want to continue to maintain rapport the entire time so that we can then ask as many times as we darn well please. So here's the 3A framework that I teach. The first A is acknowledge. When you're 85 years old on your deathbed, you're not going to wish you had fewer crazy stories. So let me introduce you to the school game. The school game is a 30-day challenge to help. All right. This is where you build rapport with the prospect version 1. All right. And the way that we do that is by saying what they said back to us. Now, there's a couple benefits from this. One is when you say it back to them, they think that you're actively listening, which of course you should. But the other part of it is that it buys you time to think about what you're going to say next. And so it gives you a little bit of space to process before you give your overcome or your handling of whatever their objection is. The second piece, and this is part of why this seems more natural with the most professional guys, is that this is the really sexy part. You associate. All right. Now there's 3 associations that I'm going to show you how to do. But what you do is you associate the question they asked with the type of behavior that someone who gets the best results from your product or service would ask. And so basically when they feel like they're taking a step away from buying, you say, that's an amazing question. That's actually a question that a lot of the best customers we have ask. And so actually you just say, nope, that means that you're more likely to buy. The third thing is that after you have made the association, you've acknowledged what they said, you've made
the biggest, the key to making that work right there, though, is it has to be a true statement in the sense that the product and the service is actually in alignment. The results of what you're selling is actually in alignment with what they need and are looking for. If not, again, you're just going to get in this feedback loop of, like he said, where people will hate you for it and you will make a terrible reputation of yourself, which is something you do not, and I repeat, absolutely do not want to do.
The association, then you ask your next question after you've properly reframed what you're going to say next. So let's dive into this. So like a lawyer in an interrogation, they never ask questions they don't already know the answers to. And you as a salesperson want to only ask questions that you know the answers to. And if you are ever going to answer questions, you want to know that you have the right answer before you respond. And so when we do the acknowledgement, let's walk through the example I had earlier. So they say, well, what kind of certifications do your trainers have? And I say, so you're curious about what our certifications are. It's a great question. It actually shows that you're a really rational person and you're making a serious decision here, which is amazing. So what I did was, boom, we restated it. Boom, we made our association. And then I would ask, you can call it an attack. It sounds a little bit more aggressive than it is, but you basically attack the frame of the question.
So, and what he's essentially going to say here is, again, you're kind of turning it back on the customer as far as like responsibility and accountability goes. So for example, if, oh geez, you're a social media manager and you're trying to sell a client on a retainer and they're just really worried about it, the amount of content you're going to post. And you're going to turn it back on them. Essentially, for an example, with something along the lines of, well, are you sure you're actually going to be able to make that amount of content? Again, you're questioning their ability to do it. And you're getting them, and this is really like the key to it, you're giving them an opportunity to buy in to the product or service you're providing or get a higher commitment level to them from them.
You say, hey, which certifications are you looking for specifically? And the thing is most people have never been asked a question about their question. They usually ask questions because they feel like they're supposed to make an informed decision. But most of the time, they don't even know what they're asking. And so they're like, I don't know. It's like, well, let me tell you what we do have. Now, if the person's like,
again, most people make really arbitrary decisions on whether or not they're going to work with you. This is why it's so important to go through, know what objections you get the most, and train on those with yourself and your salespeople.
Do they have NASM and ACE? certifications. Now, if I don't have that for my trainer specifically, I would then say, why those certifications specifically, right? And then they would say, well, I heard that they're good. It's like, well, those are amazing certifications. I agree with them. I'm not disagreeing. And then I would say, well, we have a couple other ones, and I'll tell you why we chose these rather than those. And now I can answer it without failing, right? Now, if I just said, our guys don't have that or they have this, I might have lost the sale right there. And so the thing is that this applies to basically any question that someone asks. It could even be like, I need to think about it. It'd be like, awesome, what's your main concern? Right? Like immediately, I'm not letting them out on that. Or like, hey, what are the main variables using to make the decision? Or what would make this a no? Right? These are all questions. Or what are you most afraid of having happen? Right? If I'm deeper in the sale, obviously that wouldn't be my first one. I would say, what's your main concern? And then we'd sort the question from there. But many times people ask you
which you usually need more follow-ups if you just straight up ask them what their main concern is, because they will not tell you 9 times out of 10 what their main concern actually is. Now, you can get what we call, or what we typically refer to as a tie down. So if they have an objection for you, for example, if they're questioning you, like Alex Hormorzi said, about the support of the program. So an example of that being, am I going to be able to ask more questions over email to you if they arise, right? And an example of a tie down, so you ask, well, why do you really want to be able to ask questions over email? And they'll tell you a reason. And then an example of the tie down here would be, is that your main concern is being able to feel like you understand the process of the program? And again, you're asking permission. So if they say yes, again, it's a tie down. Biggest concern. You're theoretically pushing that out of the way, whether it is or is not. But again, if that's not their biggest concern because they don't know what questions to answer, like Alex Hormorzi was saying, and you bring it back and they say, no, that isn't actually my biggest concern. My biggest concern is financial or whatever. You're giving them an opportunity to come forth with another or bigger possible objection that they haven't got to yet, or they have been a little bit nervous to talk about, but you're giving them permission to share that with you. So it's really important when you get to get those tie downs. Because either the issue of being able to ask questions via email will be the biggest issue that they have, or it won't be. And when you ask for permission for that tie down, essentially it gives them an out, right, to actually go with what the biggest thing is. So a little tricky to navigate, takes a little bit of practice, but the number one thing, especially as a sales rep, is you just need to ask questions. And again, you shouldn't be talking more than 50% of the time. And really easy way to track that, get an AI tool like Fathom that will tell you how much you're talking. You should really be talking like 20 to 30% of the time, letting your prospect talk the other 70 to 80% of the time. And most of your talking should literally just be asking questions to get to, the bone, go through the meat, get to the bone, get to the root cause of the issue.
Questions in the sale that you don't need to answer. You just ask more questions about their question. And as long as you're the one asking questions, you're the one who's in control. Which leads me to rule number 1 of the AAA. So here's a little psychology for you. As counterintuitive as this seems, a prospect believes almost nothing about what you say and almost everything that they say. And so the goal is not to tell them they're a good fit. The goal is to ask them questions so that they then say, I think I'm a good fit for this. Or yeah, that makes sense. That's how you can get them, you breadcrumb them to the logical solution, which is that they should buy your thing. And by the way, if you like some of this more advanced sales stuff, we go through this stuff in depth at our acquisition.com scaling workshop. So my sales director, he personally meets with all the companies that show up and helps them deconstrain their sales, whether it's a scripting issue, whether it's nurture issues, whether it's compensation issues. It's stuff that we understand really well. And so if you are a business owner, you are looking to scale, check them out, acquisition.com, hit the scale button, and my team will be in touch. So a lot of beginner salespeople think that they should, and this is the worst question to ever ask in sales, is do you have any questions? It's literally asking them to have objections and asking them to take the wheel of the conversation. You're literally saying, here, take control over this because I don't know what I'm doing. So please don't do that. Train that out of your team. The second thing is that as soon as you start answering questions, again, they're the judge, jury, and executioner of whether or not your answers are good. And if your salespeople are not as knowledgeable as you or your technicians, which is often true in any kind of service business, the people delivering are not necessarily the same or as knowledgeable as the people who are selling it, is that they basically set themselves up for failure. And I'll give you a quick overcome for this if someone gets a little bit like, hey, why aren't you answering my questions? You say, listen, It would be like you asking the secretary about how your heart surgery is going to be with the surgeon. You're going to want to talk to the surgeon. And I'll give you a different one. I call this the mechanic version, which is, hey, you're asking me what's wrong with your car, and it would be unethical for me to answer it without looking under the hood first. And so we can give you much better answers on the inside once we've started working with your business or with your whatever, right? With your body. It doesn't really matter, right? But you can use that analogy to kind of get around it. And then I say this, and this seals it. And if anyone, this is how I say it. And if anyone does give you an answer on the first call without already having looked under the hood, after already giving you a physical or doing an assessment, run the other way, because that means they're just trying to tell you whatever they can to get you to buy. And now I have the ethical high ground, and they can't ask any more questions about that. Rule number 2, no one can disagree with a question. I tell my team, be like smoke. And so you can't catch smoke because all you're doing is you're basically always side shifting in terms of whatever they say. You're like, ooh, let me ask you a question about that. Ooh, can you be more specific?
The other thing I will say down in regards to like be like smoke, and this is actually huge, especially if you're doing like high ticket, because usually when someone pays you thousands of dollars, they have really high expectations. But the thing is no matter what, whether it's $1 or $10,000 or $100,000, people have a certain expectation once the money has exchanged hands. And when he's saying be like smoke, the really wise thing about that, wise like smoke from sage almost, is that if they can't tie you down, just how we were talking about tie downs earlier, but for example, if they can't tie you down on a specific issue or a specific guarantee, and people will refer to the sales call through the entire engagement of the process. So it's very important for sales reps to be honest, very transparent, and convey trust, and be reputable to the brand. But again, if you're going through and you're listing off all of these things as the sales rep, that's everything that customer, they think they're going to remember all of that. And the truth be told, they'll remember some of it, but then they'll also make up other information that they think you said. Right? If you're asking questions and feeding them less information, it gives them less to theoretically retain. And again, this all will come up if any time they have any issue or if the sales rep miscommunicated, which, believe it or not, humans are humans. Humans make mistakes. They won't sell your program perfectly every single time, or your service, or whatever it is. You will have those issues. So again, asking questions is a really great way to avoid them getting a tie down on you.
Hey, what are the variables you're thinking about? And that way, you're always engaging with them, and they're the ones doing the talking, and then you get to decide whether their answers are good or not.
And that's the thing is, when they're asking you questions in that sense, it does put you on the defensive, and they have the authority to decide whether or not your answers were sufficient, which is a reason to buy or not buy. And again, at the end of the day, you want to convey trust, right? But the issue too, at the end of the day, when you're talking about situations like this, is they're the ultimate judge, right? And if you're giving them less information to judge, you can compare it almost to like the Kamala Harris campaign up until about a week ago, where it was like a blank slate, so you kind of assumed more positive things rather than, when she comes out and does interviews, and, the biggest difference, and, not to make this political, not to go one way or another with it, but for example, she says she's not Joe Biden, right? When that's like the biggest talking point that you have, it's not always a great thing. Versus a blank slate where there was just a lot of hype around her campaign prior. And, this is a whole marketing perspective, and she didn't have a lot of time to really run a proper race either. So again, when you're comparing it to when you're with your client, if you can maintain control, and if you've ever read the book Pitch Anything, and if you haven't, I really recommend it. It talks about controlling the frame, which is so important. If you can control the frame of the pitch and the entire sale, it makes a huge difference. And you really want to remain as the authority figure in that. And again, when they're asking questions, they become the ones in control and are stealing the frame from you. So being able to follow up with another question, even if it's just and you can use this technique called mirroring. If you can ask the same question back to them again to either communicate that you're understanding them correctly, Or again, like Alex Hormorzi is saying here, to dive deeper into the real root issue, it's going to make a huge difference on actually being able to move forward with the sale and navigate any objections that they have.
And whether or not they're a good fit for the program. Now, we're not going to tell them that they're a good fit for the program. We're going to have them make that decision. But in terms of judge, jury, executioner, you want that to be you.
But again, like you said, like when you're doing like leading questions or getting tie downs on them about them being a really good fit for the program. So again, you're making an analysis to them like, oh, that's a question our top clients actually ask all the time, right? So you're indicating or communicating with them like, oh, you would be a top client. You'd be a top, XYZ, right? And you're subliminally communicating with them, that answer that you really want them to get or decide on, which, oh, I'd actually be really good in this. This would be a really good offer for me, or, oh, this product would be really good. It would help me transform my business or transform my body or transform my relationship, whatever it is.
Here's why rule number 2 is so important. You can never disagree with a prospect. Now, you may, actually disagree with them, but you don't want to voice disagreement to the prospect because you never win a sale by winning an argument. Anyone who's engaged in an argument, both people lose. And more importantly for you as a salesperson, you lose the sale. And so the objective is actually to never disagree with a prospect. And the point is to get them to change their minds. And we can only do that in an agreeable way. People don't change their minds when in a bad mood or they feel insulted, right? And so we do that by asking them questions. Now, there are ways to ask questions that seem insulting, and that's what AAA helps solve. And we're going to dive more on that as we go through this. But it also means that we can ask questions about their questions, which is something that a lot of beginner salespeople don't know. They then assume they know what this person is asking about. And so they have this really vague question, and then they try and come up with the quote right answer, and they fail every time. And by the way, this is just the ultra mega hack, is that if you don't know how to answer the question, you can always ask more questions about their question. So let me show you how this sounds in reality. So someone says, I need to think about it. We say, totally understand. What are the main things you're considering? What are the variables that you're considering in your decision? What's your main concern? What are you most afraid of having happen?
Notice how you said multiple things there. It is crucial to have multiple ways you can handle every single objection that you get and that you train on all of those different answers. Just having one canned response isn't always the best because you might have slightly different situations where slightly different responses are actually a lot better and going to increase your close rate significantly.
What would make this a no? And one of my favorite questions, by the way, is, well, then what would it take for you to say yes? Now, let's say someone says, I don't have time, timing is off right now for me. You say, great, totally understand, acknowledge, timing's kind of tough for you right now. I think it's smart that you're already thinking about implementation. Our biggest success stories are actually people who think through the process the same way you are right now. So what would make it a good time? And so as you work through these two give you the space, make the positive association. They take a step back. You say, I feel you, I totally understand. Now they're back to neutral. And then you associate with the thing.
So huge example right here. So like Landing Media, we do like marketing and business consulting, right? And one of the things we do is we teach you how to create really good content or psychology-backed content that is not only going to get views on social media, which is harder and harder to do nowadays, but going to convert those views into sales for your business. And the really tough thing about that is people know, because they've usually created content before they've come to work with us, and they know how much time it takes to create content. And we might say, oh, we have a 4-month engagement, or our new program, it's 12 months long, like it's a long time. So I can guarantee you that during that time, someone is going to go on vacation, someone is going to do XYZ. And with it being 12 months, usually we've got this objection less because it's such a long engagement. But in the past, when it was 4 months, like people are like, oh, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. Let's do it when I get back from that, right? Because they want to make the most of the time. So one of the things we would really work with on our sales reps is how to, and it could be going on vacation, it could be getting divorced, it could be the kids starting school, it could be spring break, Christmas break. If you're in Colorado, they have fall break, they have winter break in addition to Christmas break. They have a lot of different holidays, right? And one of the best ways to navigate that is, well, what would make it a good time? Oh, okay, so you're really busy with clients right now. Well, do you think having better systems would be able to free up time for you to make more content? Oh, okay, yeah. So that's actually one of the things we help with a ton. What kind of systems do you currently have in your business? Great, and you just go down that rabbit hole. How are you currently spending your time? Do you currently have a time blocking or scheduling system that you use to help you manage your time better? Do you have a schedule that you follow consistently or daily? And again, a lot of it's getting accountability from the prospect. Oh yeah, I sleep until 10 o'clock. I don't work past 5. And I take a 2-hour lunch. Well, heck, you're only working for 4 hours a day. No wonder why you don't have enough time to do content. Or, oh, you don't have any systems in your business. You're doing everything absolutely manually. You don't have any templates. You do everything from scratch. Well, of course, you're going to be spending 95% of your time on client fulfillment. You have no way to actually fulfill your clients efficiently, right? So again, asking those questions and diving down and saying, okay, well, this is what is actually, going to help you. And this is why this program is the right solution for you. Because again, doing the association, like Alex Hormorzi says, our best clients actually think in this way. And once they implement systems, they have a lot more time to focus on actually growing their business by creating better content, right? So again, you just have to take a step back, take a deep breath, and ask another question. 9 times out of 10, sales reps, entrepreneurs, founders, whoever's doing sales, they will ask not enough questions. And they will rant way more than they actually need to. The key is to let your prospect talk. And the key, not only so that they feel heard, but so you actually have a really good understanding and so that you can maintain the frame and control of the situation.
That's closer to the sale, and then you move the conversation forward with the ask. So let's do another one. Someone says, I need to talk to my spouse. You say, totally understand. I think it's really sensible that you'd want to talk to your spouse, and super fair. Just so I understand, out of curiosity, what parts do you think, now I'm here, what parts do you think they wouldn't like? What parts do you think they would disagree with? And so we've now moved from I have to talk to my partner to now we're back in the sale talking about the specific things. And once we get the prospect to name.
A little side tip right here is if you often have because Kenda is currently the major face, my wife, of the Laney Media brand. So we get a lot of women who want to work with us. And oftentimes, just because of cultural norms, they'll want to make the decision with their spouse. Occasionally we get men that need to talk with their spouse first as well. But vast majority of the time we see a lot more of women. So if you get a lot of leads that are women, little trick is you can actually ask on an onboarding form, or if you have a form that they fill out before they get on the sales call, is you can ask, hey, are you the sole decision maker? If not, is there someone else that needs to be with you on this call? And you could have a yes, no, or a drop down, or a short form answer box where they can say yes, or no, I'll need my business partner or spouse on the call, right? And sometimes it's the spouse, sometimes it's the business partner. You never really know until you ask that question. So a little trick, if you get that a lot, you can just add that into your sales process to make that process a lot smoother rather than having to schedule a follow-up call trying to get both of them on the phone. Again, the longer the time goes, the higher the probability is that they go with a different option, someone else sells them before you do, or that lead goes cold.
Those things, then we can attack those, right? We're still in the sale. So let's say someone says, I hate this particular feature. You say, totally get it. I hate them all too. Just kidding. Let me just ask you a real question. Why not? And then we're back into it, right? All of these things is people will make statements as though they are deal enders. And beginners will take a statement like that and think, oh, I guess they're not going to buy. And couldn't be further from the truth. You just continue to ask questions about why they don't like something. And by continuing to ask questions about their questions, you can stay in it and keep asking, because that's the point. The best closers make the most asks, which leads me to rule number 3, which is tell them what their question means. So this is a zoom in on associate.
Hey, there's 2 things that are happening in real estate right now that may never happen again for 100 years.
Oh, Grant Cardone, time to 10 exit.
Person with at least 2 years of experience and you're enjoying this stuff, this is like just the surface of the type of stuff that we train our teams on. And if you'd like to work at acquisition.com or one of our portfolio companies, we are always looking for exceptional salespeople. We have a lot of roles open right now in sales. And so you can go to acquisition.com/careers and hit the business consultant button. That'll take you to the application for that. If you're good, just apply. We're willing to be flexible on payments based on experience and whatnot, but just put in the application. So the first time I had this used on me, I was actually getting pitched investment or private wealth management from somebody. And I wanted to just get out of the conversation as fast as I could because I was like, I already have a wealth advisor, like I'm good. And the guy just said, oh, that's amazing. 90% of the clients we have that shift over already have a wealth advisor. So it means you already know how a lot of these things work, which means you'll be up the learning curve. And I was like, what just happened? I was like, I thought I was getting out of this and now I'm more like the customers that ultimately buy. And I ended up not buying from that particular guy. But I did think, wow, that was such a powerful reframe. How can I use that in all of my selling? And so the prospect has not had
the look he gave him. I sat through another 50 minutes of a sales pitch. Oh man. Yeah. If you've been through a sales pitch like that, you know the look, you know the feeling. But that's funny. And the thing is as entrepreneur, as a founder or a salesperson, it isn't always the biggest waste of time to sit through really good pitches where they have really good reframes like that, because you can pick up on little things that either A, they're doing correctly, things you don't know, or B, as you become more experienced, the little things they're doing wrong that are really going to keep you from making that buying decision, right? And, some of the best advice I can give you is watch how every single person you meet that you do business with, watch how they sell you, watch how they sell other people, and take note of it, right? It's just free ammunition, free experience to go in your pocket to use at a later date.
This conversation as many times as you. You should never be caught off guard with the questions or the statements that they're going to make. Remember, you've had 1,000 of these conversations. The fact that somebody could surprise you is ridiculous. You have to practice. This is why we train. And so a prospect is trying to just throw up bombs or smoke screens to get out of the sale. And again, to be clear, what I believe is bad selling is one of two key things. One is you sell an unqualified prospect, which basically means that you're lying to them that they're going to get a good result, or that they somehow are qualified when they're really not, which really underpins the main thing of sales, in my opinion, which we have across really all of our communication stuff in the company, which is state the facts and tell the truth. If you state the facts and tell the truth, and this person is qualified, then you have the ethical obligation to ask as many times as humanly possible and get them to pull their head out of their ass so that they can see the world clearly instead of it being dark and full of shit, which it is up their ass, and help them make a decision to help themselves. That's the point. Now, if you get weird about resistance, then you don't understand the job of sales. The best salespeople are comfortable when other people feel like there's conflict, all right? And so they're able to always de-escalate, which is why be like smoke is so key. It's a dance, not a fight. It's seduction, not rape, all right? The idea is that we want to always have consent from the person. We always want them to want to be there. And people like you when you ask questions about them. People like you when you compliment them and you say, hey, that's a really smart question. Hey, that makes you just like the people who have the best success stories. And I'll show you a little bit more about some more associations in the next rule, which leads me to rule number 4, use straw men for tough truths. So we've all been in a sale where someone just says something ridiculous, where you can clearly see that their beliefs around the world are so flawed that you have to have kind of a papa talk, right? Now, there's different ways of entering this. Some people say, hey, can I put my coach hat on instead of my friend hat? So the thing is that in all of these reframes, you're basically getting permission from the person to give them a harsh truth. Now, if you're a younger guy, and let's say you sell B2B, much tougher to do. So if you're a 22-year-old sales guy and you're talking to a 45-year-old, $10 million plumber, he probably doesn't give a shit about you trying to put your coach hat on. He just thinks you're a child and he doesn't care at all. To the same degree, if you say, hey, well, can I share something that really worked well for me? Again, the same degree, that puts you above him and he's not gonna like that. And so I use 3 different strategies of straw men. And straw men in argumentation is basically putting, I use the word foil normally, but people don't know what that means. But basically, it's like you basically put up this caricature of someone who's just like them that you can then have the tough conversation with without insulting the prospect. So I'll give you 3 different ways that we do this. So the first way is when you make the association. So this is us going deep on associate here, okay? So this is where someone says whatever it is, totally understand that you're coming from that direction. I would ask those questions too. Now we make the association, so 1 of 3. So number 1, you can say, it's so funny you asked that because I had someone just earlier today who asked the same questions. Can I share with you what I just shared with them? Now the thing is that because I'm now talking about a conversation I had with someone else, I can now be brutal as fuck to this other person, but I'm not saying it to the prospect, and so it's not insulting. The second way that you can do this is that you do it in reference, and I said it earlier, to a successful past customer. That's so great, totally understand. You know what? That actually makes you just like Sarah, who had a similar plumbing business and actually crushed it with our marketing agency. And so now we've made the association, and she asked this question too, boom. And then we handle the objection, all right? And so these straw men are particularly important when you are going to answer a question. So everything up to this point has been basically sidestepping, being like smoke, but sometimes you will have to make the answer. And so if we do need to give them an explanation or kind of break their belief when they say, I don't have time, you're like, oh, well, it's not really a timing thing, it's a priorities question. But if you say that to somebody and you don't have as much rapport, you're gonna lose the sale, right? Like that is the logical thing. Everybody has the same amount of time every day. It's really just a question of priorities. But if you say that at the wrong time, they're gonna be like, screw you, right? And so by doing the straw man or putting the foil up or the caricature that you can then attack or talk to in front of this prospect, it creates a third party that's neutral. The third way of using the associate is that you can appeal to authority. So if you're in a business where the CEO is edified or the CEO is seen as a respectable person or an expert in the field, so it either can be fame or it can be influence or it can be expertise. It doesn't really matter which one, but as long as they have some level of expertise, instead of appealing to your own authority, you appeal to theirs. Which is, it's so funny that you asked that. Alex just told me this thing earlier today, can I share it with you? Right? And so then the person appeals to someone else's authority and then shares it. They're the messenger. They're not saying, I'm not saying this. He said it and I'm just sharing it with you. These sound like tiny sidesteps, but this type of AAA reframing is what separates beginners from pros. And when you do it this way, people actually like to be sold by you because they feel like they're being heard. You make associations that are saying, hey, that's smart. Hey, that's reasonable. Totally understand why you'd say that. Like, these are all things, like that's a rational decision. Hey, I think that's a fair point. Those are all things that someone wants to hear. They're like, hey, he's listening. He thinks I'm intelligent or I'm rational, or he's not discarding my decision. Everybody wants to be validated, right? So it's the same thing as the angry boat, but just in a sales conversation. So in the angry boat for customer success or customer service, if someone's upset, you don't disagree with them and say, hey, it wasn't that big of a deal. Sorry, we were 5 minutes late. It never works because you're disagreeing with them. You're invalidating the reason that they're angry. So you have to get more angry. You have to go above. And that's where you say, hey, that's a totally reasonable concern, rather than saying that's a stupid question, right? Like you might feel that way, but you don't say that. And the reason I realized this, especially with the association one, is I heard my sales guys and they were having a tougher time using some of the closes. And I was like, they're like, yeah, some of them they sound a little, tough. They're a little harsh. And I was like, no. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, it's because they're not prefacing it with this. If you preface with this, you can say almost anything. And this allows you to cut to the heart of the matter way faster instead of dancing around it because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Which leads me to rule number 5, which is retain childlike curiosity at all times. So one of my favorite ways of training this concept is actually training a physical thing that you do with your body, even if you're on a sales call and they can't see you, because your tone will change based on how you're standing. If you're smiling or not, your voice will come out different.
Again, tonalities matter a ton. That's really going to help with the childlike curiosity. It's really funny because I think I know who we got most of the sales training information from, because it's out there. I know who teaches on it. At least I know several people who teach on it. Anyways, who knows who actually came up with all the original stuff here. But like with the childlike curiosity, super important to have a almost like a childlike tonality to it, where you're asking it from almost a point of innocence, not ignorance, but innocence, right? Like you don't know, so you're asking, right? Whether or not you know. So like person in the fitness industry, where it's like, oh, do you usually get that many clients a month? Oh, do you usually do meal plans for them, right? Even though if you sell people in the fitness industry, you probably know better than they do what their situation is, right? The issue is you can't tell them that because if you do, again, it's not really maintaining control of the situation or the authority frame, and people don't like to be talked over. People don't like to have their situation told to them. So again, asking questions and almost playing dumb in a sense, that childlike curiosity or keeping that there, pretending every conversation is new and that you honestly don't know, makes a huge difference. But you just really have to practice the tonalities of it and how to ask those questions properly. Otherwise, if it comes across weird or if you're just asking for, following a script's sake, it's not going to work the way you're going to want it to work.
Which, by the way, I encourage you to have a mirror if you're on the phone next to you in your sales booth. And if you do Zoom, obviously you can see your own little image there. But I like to have people say, huh, and you say it just like that. And huh also buys you 2 or 3 seconds before you say your next thing. Say, huh, that's so interesting that you'd ask that.
So also notice what he did when we went, huh, right? I didn't do it right the first time because I was looking at the camera. But again, he's looking up, like he's thinking, because people think when you look up that you're like thinking in your brain. He tilted his head. So there was verbal, the and the tonality of the, the up pitch at the end, which generally when you're asking a question, you have the tone go up at the end, right? Versus when you're making a statement, the pitch goes down at the end, right? Tonality and the tones that you're making very important. So there was the verbal aspect of it, and then there was the nonverbal aspect. So the tilt with the head, the looking up, all of that is a nonverbal communication to the client that you're asking a question and that you're doing it earnestly, right? Versus, I wonder why that is. That question comes across way differently because you're looking at him like a sociopath and you already know the answer, right? It just doesn't work the same.
That question. Can I ask you a little bit more about that? Like, if someone says something really nasty to you, right? But if you retain that way, the goal is to seek to understand, not win. And the way that I try to keep this, and if you're a sales guy, put a little sticky note above your camera or wherever you look while you're selling, which is keep the human number one. All right, and so this is a really powerful frame that I actually learned from Layla for having hard conversations on the team, but it actually applies to sales, which is if you genuinely believe that the product you have is gonna help this person, and this is a qualified prospect that you're talking to, then you want to understand their concerns so that you can help them get over them because you know this is the right decision for them. And so this is a frame that I like to think about. So let's say you could travel back in time, but you're in a different body, and you see your old self, and you know what the future is going to be, and you might say, okay, I have to convince this person to buy NVIDIA 10 years ago. And so, or I have to buy Apple stock, or I have to buy Bitcoin, whatever it is, I don't really care. The thing is you know that this thing's gonna go through the roof. But the person you're talking to doesn't know you from Adam. Think about how you talk to that person. Now remember, they don't know who you are. Even though you know you would have absolute empathy for your old self and be like, listen, I totally understand, this seems totally crazy, but let me walk you through what I think is going to happen, right? What are your main concerns? What are you most afraid of, right? What would it take for you to say yes? What would it take for us to take the next step together? It allows you to make sure that you're focusing on the prospect rather than the product. And so you don't close sales by being right, you close sales by making the prospect right. And so the big understanding here is that you want to understand them, not beat them. Because as soon as it feels combative, you've already lost the sale. If they feel like you won an argument logically, you've lost the sale. The point is to make money, not to be right. And so we want them to feel good about the logical decision that we're helping them make. And if anything, you want to be a faceless hero in their journey. You're like, hey, I'm just the guide here. I'm going to just share the information that I think will help you make a good decision. Right? Oh, that's a great question. Can I provide a little bit of context on that, just from someone that had this experience earlier today? Right? Like all of these things are things that will allow you to give those hard truths to close the deal. The reason the association is so important is that it gives the prospect a label to then live up to. And so this is a 201 version of selling. But if you say, hey, you seem like a really honest person, or hey, that's a really smart decision, or hey, that's a really smart question, if I then give them that label, when I get closer to the close, I might bring that back up and then associate smart people by this thing. Right? Hey, you must be a good family man, right? Because you had some spouse objection. Fine. Seems like you're a family man. Family's really important to you. I think that's awesome. Super admirable. Now, when I get to the end of the sale, I can bring up the fact that this is a family man, and because he's a family man, he should buy. And so it allows me to pair whatever their obstacle.
Again, going back, you're getting like those macro tie downs, right? That you can then use later on when they decide that they're not a family man, right? But oh, well, again, you're getting micro tie downs that help them commit to who they are, commit to what they do, and commit to buying your product or service, and not only committing, but actually being bought in. Again, a lot of sales, and it sounds bad, but you can have someone that's completely qualified, but they don't believe that it's the solution, and they could work with you, and it's not going to work out well. You could have someone be completely unqualified that's not actually a good fit, but believe that's the right solution for them, and it could work out amazingly, right? Obviously, like within reason there, but again, there's a certain amount of like belief that goes into like actually being like bought into it. And if you can get that, it makes a huge difference. It's literally like why Alex Hormorzi creates the content that he actually does, is because he wants to create people who are bought in to working with him to grow their businesses. So when he asks for 10% or 20% or 50% of their business, it's like, oh, okay, this is the solution. Even, and let's say he works mostly with like online service providers or whatever. So even when the dental cleaning place comes by, and there might be other people who work with franchises a little bit better. They're sold on creating content, running ads, changing the sales method, everything that Alex here actually does, right? They're sold on it. So even though they might not be the best fit, they're sold on the method. Versus like someone could come to them with like a digital software service or an information service that they're just hitting out of the ballpark, but they're not thoroughly convinced that Alex is the right guy to partner with. And they could do a deal with him, and it could go terribly because they don't believe, right? But like the content that he creates is literally designed to make his prospects believe that he is the best solution for them to grow their businesses, which is why they're willing to give up that equity, right?
Obstacles were with things that I'm going to bring up in the close. Pro tip, my universal response for almost anything. So I walked through the sales floor, and one of the guys was on the phone, and I was like, you should come. And I just walked through the room, and then the guy was like, and so my sales guy was like, so you coming? And the guy was like, yeah. And it was a super weak, right? He was obviously not sold yet. So I actually was like, give me the phone. And so I hopped on the phone, and I said, dude, what are you afraid of? And so when you ask, what are you most afraid of? It gets you to the heart of the issue as fast as possible. Now, if it's the first objection, I would want to ask, what's your main concern? What's your main issue? What are the variables used to make the decision? That's like kind of understanding so you can triage. But when I'm further along in the sale, I'll usually ask, hey, what are you afraid of, man? Like, what are you afraid of having happen? And if someone's like, I just need more time, then you say, totally understand. What would make it a no? And so by doing that, it still keeps you in the sale, because at the end of the day, like, you want to make a good decision. I'm the source of your information. So the best possible decision we can make is here. But again, you can only say something like that if you have rapport in the sale, and if you continue to demonstrate that throughout. If I said something like that and I didn't have rapport, they'd be like, no, fuck you. So it's not going to work. If you liked this very mini training, you're going to...
Oh, Awesome. That was a great video. That was pretty much, I mean, it's not what I expected. I was genuinely curious when I saw the title of the video. I had no idea what he was actually going to talk about. Kind of surprised I knew like 80% of what he talked about. A lot of good tidbits in there. Hopefully you took notes. Hopefully you're going to teach this to your sales team. Hopefully you're actually going to apply all of this information, because it was really great. It's like what we do with our sales team, and we close between like 40 and 60% of all leads that come in. It kind of depends on the month, and if we have videos go viral, we have typically a lower conversion rate, because you just get more riffraff in, versus if you have like highly targeted content that isn't necessarily viral. But again, we close a lot higher than most people do on average, than like industry average of like 25-30%. So, and this is all stuff that we train on and apply in our sales process. So, just to summarize, make sure you're asking the right questions. Make sure that your prospect is actually talking more than you. Remember that it's all about the human at the end of the day, and remember to ask just one more question if you're not sure. It really helps you maintain the frame and lead to more closed deals. If you guys got any value from this video whatsoever, please subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference in helping me reach entrepreneurs just like you and helping you grow your business. I hope you appreciate this, and I hope you have a great day.